Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 56 of our weekly Q&A video / podcast. Links in the description on the video for podcast format, and if you're on the podcast, BDCKR Gaming on YouTube for the video.
So a couple of, I guess, housekeeping notes. The first thing is, we're going to try to keep this one a little bit short. We're going to get to the point where we're going to ramble a lot less, because
I have an essay due tonight that is 16 pages and worth 40%.
Aye.
And I'm done it. I'm like 99% done it. I'm mostly done it. But I still need to like do citations and like title page and like final touches and stuff. And if anything comes up, I don't want to have no time to submit it instead of enough time to submit it.
That sounds like more than 1%.
Well, it's a 16-page essay, so how long is doing citations compared to writing 16 pages?
I guess. And I thought that we both agreed, I think, that it was probably worth doing something shorter than to skip.
Yeah.
And the other thing, a housekeeping note, is we were lacking in footage. Normally what I like to do in a Phantom Zone week is to have a few final crystals. And couldn't, because I'm getting some real trouble with AZ screen recorder, because it, for some reason now, it's crashing in the middle of recording sessions. So
which is the worst time to crash.
That doesn't help when I'm on a good run and all of a sudden the icon disappears and it looks like the file's corrupted and I get no footage out of that.
Yeah. So it would actually be a lot better if it crashed right at the beginning. I guess the only time that's worse would be right at the end. Yeah. And losing it anyways.
Because then at least I have the choice, in the middle I have the choice to stop.
Yeah.
So I've been playing around with Mobizen. Maybe next week we're going to see gameplay with Mobizen instead of AZ screen recorder. And it seems like, I feel like one's stolen from the other because the interface is almost exactly the same, with the graphics being so close that I can't really tell the difference except for the fact that it's got Mobizen as a mark on it instead of just playing with AZ screen recorder.
Yeah.
So interesting anyways. Moving on. So what we're going to focus more on this week is more questions and less rambling, which is probably to the benefit and preference for a lot of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah. So getting straight into the first question, Ray Anguiano, my best shot at it, Anguiano.
Let us know. We're always curious about, and you know what? Let us know what the root sort of culture language of that name is, because I'm always curious, because then you know how sometimes it influences the way things are pronounced. I'm just curious.
A lot of times it does.
Maybe every time it does.
Yeah, that's true. Favorite character regardless of stats or passives. Like, what character do you just love the design, or favorite DC character overall? Mine's AO Deathstroke or Prime Deathstroke. He's always been the coolest, in my opinion. I love that they added him in Injustice 2.
I like Deathstroke. I think, but I guess if you've been listening to us for a long time, a lot of people will be able to guess my answer.
Yeah.
It's Flash.
Yeah, because regardless of stats or passive, how they play is definitely the Flash. Right, but if it's what character do you just love the design of, or favorite DC character overall, I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of affinity for Batman as a guy. I think there's been a lot of good Batman media, and so he's been more present, and I think there was...
So you're taking it outside of character in the game, but just any character in the DC universe.
Yeah, and I think there's some designs that have been pretty cool, like, you know, Arkham Knight, Batman, and stuff.
Right.
It's pretty high-tech, and I think... maybe the part of the reason why I like that outside of the game is because I actually, you know, did play the Arkham Knight video game.
Right.
And so I have that sort of, I've double dipped with that same character.
Does that mean by default it's the characters? Because not every skin or version is going to hit the sweet spot. So that means by default the best chance of having somebody that you really like is going to be somebody who's one of the iconic characters where there's going to be a lot of different artists and writers' takes on that character.
Probably. And the one also with the most universe skins in the game, if you like design. Right. I think Static's really cool with his flying.
Yeah, I'm not big on his haircut, though. I mean, it's too evocative of Whoopi Goldberg, and I know that's part of the character, but it means I'm not a big fan of the way he looks.
Yeah, that's very fair. But I like that he's got the, you know, little floating thing.
Out of all the Flash skins, I like Elseworld Flash the best. Awful stats, a passive that was good and got nerfed, so it's pretty stinky passive now.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the way he looks, I love that look.
Red Lantern Hal Jordan's a little fun.
Oh, especially with the whole Red Sun team. Or no, Red Lantern. Oh, sorry.
Red
I was thinking,
Lantern, yeah.
oh, okay. I was thinking, when you
Red
said
Sun,
that,
Green Lantern.
in my mind I was thinking the armor.
I don't like Red Sun, Green Lanterns. I was also specifically going to say that. I don't like Red Sun, Green Lantern's, like, look himself. But I think what his passive does with the armor is cool.
Right.
So I think he makes the other Red Sun characters look cooler, but I don't actually like how he looks himself, because he just looks like he's... I don't know, he looks like he's ready to brave, like, a cold winter's day. He doesn't look like he's ready to brawl.
Right. There's something about the hat that, or the whatever that he's wearing, that takes away from it, makes him a little bit less intimidating.
And isn't he also wearing, like, a puffy coat, too?
Yeah.
Like, he's, like, wearing, like, a thick, like, jacket.
Yeah. Oh, Lobo. I've always liked Lobo, and I don't know whether it's just by the design or because some of the artists, the iconic Lobo artist, I believe is Simon Bisley.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Simon Bisley draws Lobo is great. And you might get that from the fact that we use Lobo as our YouTube avatar.
Yeah.
And you can see him in our outro on most of our videos.
Mm-hmm.
When he's in our pocket.
Yeah, so those are some characters that we like the look of. Is there anybody else? I think Doomsday looks pretty cool. Like, just,
the regular Doomsday
Prime.
Pickled suit.
Pickled suit Doomsday looks ridiculous. I think he looks funny. I like how he looks. But I don't think he's... I mean, I guess if funny is the qualification, we've talked about that already, right? We've talked about Pickle Suit Doomsday and Arkham Origins, Batman, and all the people that we think look silly.
At different times. Because actually, Arkham Origins Batman is, to me, outside of his stubble, I think he actually looks really good. He's actually one of my favorite Batman skins in terms of appearance. Yeah,
he's good in a lot of ways, but then his stubble just really doesn't stand up to up-close scrutiny, and his special 3, his super, really gives you a close look at those beard hairs that they've modeled for some reason, but just not well.
When I was reading comics more, I used to think Deathstroke was so cool, and it wasn't necessarily so much of the design, but the idea that's been, I think, mostly disproven, that somehow if you take a person and got them to utilize, instead of 10% of their brain, 90% of their brain, that they'd be able to do so much more physically.
Oh, you mean you think it's been disproven?
I think so. Off the top of my head,
it's definitely been disproven.
Okay, so
we use all of our brain.
Yeah, so like I said, I don't know, because there's going to be stuff that's not functional in the way that we think a brain functions. Some of it's insulation that you need.
Yeah.
Some of it is like supporting. It's, you know what it's like? It's like people with big muscles.
Yeah.
You can be big and you can be lean, but if you're both, I think there's probably a 95+% chance that you're on performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't mean somebody who looks big, because basically to me the definition of looking big is when you put on clothes, do you look like you're really big?
Yeah.
And if you do, and when you take off the clothes and you're really cut and lean,
you're either on performance enhancing drugs or you're really putting yourself through suffering, like some actors who like don't drink
drugs.
water.
Oh yeah,
but also but even past that, like not drinking water before a scene so that they have more muscle definition.
Yeah, but they're still relatively small. The ones that aren't small, and I'm not saying that the smaller ones that are lean aren't using performance enhancing. I'm just saying that if you've got both, the chance of using it is way higher. Yeah. What was the point we were talking about? How did we get on that track?
10% of the brain.
Oh,
you said.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, off the top of my head, I couldn't remember exactly. So in my mind, we know certain things, and the metadata tags on it aren't clear enough to remember. Oh, for sure, I know this is disproven. But anyways, it was a neat idea, and I don't know whether the way I thought Deathstroke used, because it used to be in the grocery stores.
Yeah.
The way you could get comics were, some of the grocery stores would have a comic rack. Most of them didn't. And a lot of them would have the little racks at the cash out, like impulse buys, and they'd have a lot of Archie comics.
Yeah.
And they'd have a bunch of Teen Titans comics. And they would so those little digests would have a bunch of issues of Teen Titans, and you'd see Deathstroke in there sometimes. And I thought, I was like, man, he looks really cool. To me, he was like the epitome of the sort of not really powered superhero. Yeah. Like Batman. Or you might almost put Captain America, because Captain America's super serum stuff isn't supposed to be... Is it that he's superhuman, or that it maximizes his human potential?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Probably different in different stories, I bet.
I guess so. So I always thought Deathstroke was really cool, and the idea that, the fact that he had a patch on one eye made him a little bit cooler. I don't know. I was a kid. I didn't know any better.
You saw something and you liked it, and you
Yeah.
didn't really have the words for it. You just knew what you liked.
That's right.
Yeah, the 10% of your brain thing is definitely wrong, because we all use different parts of our brain at different times.
Right.
And like some of the things that make us use a lot of our brain all at once is like seizures. You know.
Right.
Right. That's like something that causes like really diffuse activation in your brain.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Uncoordinated action. Yeah.
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 But if you could coordinate action in every part of your brain at once, what would that just mean? That would just mean, doing a million different things at once. Like if you're doing like cartwheels while also, like feeling intense fear while also, like doing like a Scrabble puzzle or something, you'd be activating more parts of your brain, right? It doesn't let you, because parts of your brain do different stuff, right?
So I wonder if you used your brain and replaced some of the activity. So to me, the possibility is, the potential is, that you could integrate sort of more information coming in, and also be able to make more calculations about your impact of your own action, so that you could actually do stuff where, like big gymnastics moves without having to practice them, or taking into account like changing bits of your environment, so that when because when you see people do amazing things, usually it's because they practice that specific thing a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think what actually happens is, because there's ranges, and, I don't say that this is a bad thing at all, but, like, if we talk about, like, ADHD, right? Like, one of the things about ADHD is it's increased brain activation in certain regions.
Right.
And so I don't personally view that as a bad thing. I view it as, like, a trade-off, right? But that's the whole thing, is that there are, like, conditions, there are, like, diagnosable conditions that are entirely about, like, too much brain activation in a certain area. Right. And I think when you find that people train and stuff, what happens a lot of time is, I think their actual baseline, it's almost like heart rate, their baseline activation is lower.
Right.
Get the same sort of function across. Right. And then when they're working it, their brain activation might actually be the same as somebody who's, a little bit less talented. Yeah. And so there's some amount where, you get better at something and your brain activates more. But the other thing that happens is you actually get more efficient, because, everything's energy.
That's perfect. To me, that's very much like having a codec to compress a file so you can get the same information. So I read something, or maybe I commented about how somebody theorized that a high-level basketball player like LeBron James, for example, can remember so much about specific games and specific moments, and he can tell you almost perfectly what happened at a certain time, because his brain is so well trained that in his mind, for remembering stuff, he's almost got like shortcuts, so that it takes him less brain power to remember something much more complicated, because he's got these, I guess, frameworks and compression codecs, basically, to put together the scene with the minimal amount of brain capacity taken up.
Yeah. They've done studies and stuff. One of the things they looked at was studying like kids who were experts at chess versus adults who were not, and they would give them a chess problem, and the kids would be way better at solving them. And then they would use all of the parts of a chessboard, but they would set up some move that was impossible to exist in chess, or they would say, okay, now pretend this thing moves in a different way. Yeah. And then the second you change stuff, their advantage totally fell apart, and they like study brain activation and stuff. So for a lot of that, it is really a lot more about just getting better at processing stuff. Right. It's not, because you don't want to use your brain more intensely for doing a task. Actually, ideally, you just want to do the best job possible, because the more you're using your brain, the more energy you're burning. And, every brain has some sort of capacity limit, and there's no way to remove that, just because, like, you only have so fast that your neurons can fire. When you get down to the basic level of it, if your neurons are growing over and over and over again all the time, really, really fast all the time, you're just burning energy, and there's nowhere to go from there. You max out at some point.
In my mind, it's a lot like, this is my analogy, because even though, I've done a lot of weight training, and I'm stronger than I used to be when I was younger, that my sort of wheelhouse is academics. And I always thought that part of getting good at school was learning and then recognizing areas where you could make that leap of faith, where you could have the rules. And in a lot of ways, it is like compression, because instead of, let's say for the Pythagorean theorem, you could learn how to figure out the hypotenuse from first principles every time. Right? Like to recreate the Pythagorean theorem every single time. Yeah. But instead of that, what you've got is a shortcut so that it's codified this one specific idea and then you trust it enough because you've done it enough that you just take that leap of faith every single time.
That's called a heuristic.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's called a heuristic, and that's one of those things that's good in general. That's also the thing in the human mind that generates like stereotypes and stuff. That when you have like personal experiences, it generates stuff. So it's one of those things that is right a lot and is helpful, and we need heuristics in our day to day.
Right.
But then when they go wrong, they can give us really crappy situations. So it's like when you see somebody from behind and you see like long hair.
Right.
And maybe a coat that you think is more feminine, and then you use gendered pronouns for them, because you just make that assumption, and then they turn around and they go, actually, I'm a dude. And you go, oh, oops, sorry, right? So you jump to that conclusion, and maybe 9 times out of 10, or even 90 times out of 100. Or 99 times out of 100, because I said 90 times out of 100 is just 9 times out of 10 again. You're right, but for that one time, it always is a little awkward and it feels a little funky.
Right.
Yeah. So
it definitely is interesting, right? Like I've thought about, so I didn't realize. I mean, I've thought about it without actually doing any research.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that there was the language to talk about it properly like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and heuristics are absolutely necessary for us to do things, because if you didn't make any assumptions, I mean, like using perceptual heuristics is the only way that we can make sense of anything around us, because the only way that you can perceive something from a single picture, if you ever see a 2D image and you go, oh, that's a building and that is like a rectangular shape, there's an infinite possible number of things that could have made that building shape on a 2D image, and you have to use that heuristic to assume, otherwise you never see anything.
Right.
So there's a bunch of stuff that we have to take those shortcuts, and being an expert in something is mostly just taking better shortcuts and taking the right shortcuts.
And having more shortcuts.
And having more, yeah.
And you think about it, it's amazing to me, because I was just thinking about this when I was looking at some friends' pictures about their newborn twins.
Yeah.
And learning to walk. How difficult it is when you actually have to walk by thinking about every single muscle that you're firing at the same time to balance and to take the next step. Mm-hmm. At a time when you don't even have the strength in those muscles to do it. Mm-hmm. That's amazing that kids ever learn how to walk.
Yeah. That's one funny thing about reflexes in kids too, is that there's some stuff that kids unlearn how to do because it's built into their reflexes. Mm-hmm. And then there's a certain age where you sort of overcome your natural reflex instincts.
What do you mean by... Because to me, there's two kinds of reflexes, the way we talk about it. Reflexes sometimes are where there's a stretch contraction. So, when you do a knee jerk, like somebody hammers you in the knee to make your leg kick. Yeah. That's one kind of reflex. And the other kind of reflex is something more like a heuristic, where people they respond really quickly to a stimulus. Yeah,
so, for example, there's a, reflex where if you if you rub a baby's lips, they open their mouth to suck. Right?
Suckling reflex.
Yeah, the suckling reflex. There's other little stuff like that. There's, I forget, there's one if you lean a baby back, they'll, stretch out and, clench and unclench their fists like they're reaching out for something.
Right. There's a glabellar reflex too. I think it's like tapping the forehead. I can't remember what it does. Is it that they unlearn it, or is it they just eventually get extinguished because they don't do that voluntarily? Yeah. So essentially, it gets extinguished. But what happens is you start to transfer when you're like a baby. You're pretty much just doing reflexes. There's the way that you live is stuff that was already baked into your brain. Because if you had to learn stuff right at the start... You'd be lying like a blob 24 hours a day.
Well, you'd pop out of your parent, and then you'd stop. You would have to learn how to breathe, and you would have about, however many minutes to learn how to breathe, and then you would die because you're a baby, and, nobody... Right. It's very hard to communicate with you and tell you, what your lungs are in enough time for you to not get, brain damage and die. But then there's a certain time there where you end up losing a lot of reflexes, so it can seem like a baby actually loses some of the skills that they have because they
have to voluntarily learn it.
Yeah. So they have a reflex. The reflexes start to get extinguished. Yeah, they start to take over with voluntary control. And then they have to learn how to do the thing that their body was just telling them naturally as sort of a knee-jerk reaction, as a gimmick. And then they have to go, okay, well, now I'm in control of it. That's not happening anymore. All right, neat. That's interesting. There's certain types of, like neurodegenerative conditions that will bring back those like baby reflexes.
All right, so then that you could make the argument then that part of it is you lose those reflexes because your higher level cortex suppresses them. And then as your cortex degenerates with, degenerative diseases like dementia, then they come back because that suppression, that sort of, what do you call those? When a regulator, not a regulator, but, like that kind of, I can't even think of the words, but you know what I mean? Like okay, never mind. But, all right, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Man, human body is so complex and interesting.
Most living things are very complex.
That's true.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The seat of our consciousness, though, our brain seems like particularly complex as far as, like something that not a lot of animals are able to reproduce.
Yeah. That's a whole other question, is if, what's different and how much more complicated is it, and how much more is it just that it's complicated in a different way? What's or how complicated is it for stuff to just already be built in? Right? Anyways, that's outside of the scope of this Injustice YouTube channel.
That's true.
So we're at time now. We're gonna answer maybe more questions.
You think you gotta spare a bit more time? We've already at the 20-something minute mark. Okay, cool.
We'll do one other quick one. This one comes from Elijah Rawlins, and they say, "Is there any way to delete a character? I max promoted a few characters that would be better with no promotions for online." And so this is a pretty easy one. No. It is not possible. You have to get somebody to hack your account to do that. And we've wished that it was possible. We've wanted it to be possible for a long time.
Right.
And it just is
that would be a great way to play the game.
Yeah.
I mean, that would actually make the game better if you had the option to play at whatever level below what you've achieved.
Yeah.
And almost like a slider where you can just adjust down. I would love that.
There we go. And now we're done. Okay. Okay. And just to finish up, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Eliza I'm Russian Caton. She's Russian. This shout out was brought to you by me being lazy and having very little time this week because of my paper. So we're both Russian.
Wow. All right, that was not bad. I like that. Okay.
We'd also like to give a huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
That would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the accredited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.